5 years have passed since my girlfriend mysteriously vanished from my life, and the pain of her disappearance has lingered, leaving me single and yearning for answers. I'm a 29-year-old man who has remained unattached for half a decade, primarily because my girlfriend seemingly erased herself from my existence without any trace. For 5 long years, I've abstained from pursuing any new romantic relationships, holding on to the faint hope that one day she might reappear and rekindle what we once had. Our relationship began in the final year of high school, a time filled with youthful romance and dreams of a future together. Over nearly 6 years, we shared countless memories, supporting each other through the challenges of college life. Despite the physical distance that often kept us apart, limiting our meetings to perhaps once or twice a month, our bond remained strong in my mind. I cherished the notion that we had a happy and fulfilling relationship, one that was cherished not only by us but also by our friends. On my 24th birthday, I had meticulously planned to take our relationship to the next level by proposing marriage. The day was meant to be unforgettable, surrounded by our closest friends and family members who had witnessed our journey together. However, fate had other plans. Just a day before my birthday, she informed me that she would be late coming home from work. I waited anxiously all night, anticipating her arrival, but she never showed up. My calls went unanswered, and my texts remained unread, over 100 of them, to be exact. Desperate for answers, I reached out to her friends and family, only to be met with silence and blockage from everyone we knew. Our mutual friends were clueless about her whereabouts, with some bluntly suggesting I should move on, even if they had any knowledge to share. Her social media presence had completely vanished. It was as if she had evaporated into thin air overnight. To this day, I remain uncertain whether she was aware of my impending proposal or if her disappearance was merely coincidental. Regardless, she was gone, leaving me powerless and heartbroken. I contemplated filing a missing person report with the police but ultimately decided against it, convinced that she hadn't been forcibly taken but had chosen to disappear on her own accord. In an attempt to locate her, I created numerous fake social media accounts under various aliases, hoping to trace her online. Unfortunately, my efforts were in vain. She either deleted her accounts or was using a name I couldn't associate with her. It became clear that she was effectively untraceable, and the emotional toll of my fruitless search forced me to abandon hope. Despite the overwhelming evidence that she had moved on without me, I couldn't bring myself to let go. I believed with all my heart that she was happy with me, that our relationship was genuine and fulfilling. She had certainly played the part of the perfect girlfriend during our time together. Instead of moving forward with my life, I chose to remain in a state of suspended animation, waiting for her return. Whether it was to rekindle our relationship or to receive some form of closure, I longed for her to explain what had gone wrong. In the meantime, I attempted to connect with a few other women, going on a handful of dates in an effort to distract myself from the lingering thoughts of my ex-girlfriend. However, every time I tried to engage with someone new, her face would flash in my mind, serving as an emotional barrier that prevented me from fully investing in these new connections. The constant comparison and emotional baggage became too much to bear, leading me to cease all dating attempts altogether. For nearly 4 years, I resisted the urge to ask anyone out or to open myself up to new relationships. It wasn't that I was incapable of forming new connections, but the mere thought of dating someone else brought back the painful memories of my lost love, making the idea of moving on unbearably difficult. Eventually, I sought professional help and began attending therapy sessions 3 years ago. Therapy provided me with the tools to manage my emotions and cope with the ongoing situation in a healthier manner. While I no longer spent all my time brooding or obsessively searching for her, I couldn't claim to have completely forgotten about her. It might sound pathetic to some, but my feelings for her were genuine and deep-rooted. The inexplicable way she vanished without any explanation left me in a state of perpetual confusion and heartache. 2 weeks ago, during a visit to my mother's house, I inadvertently overheard a conversation that would forever change my understanding of what had happened. My 33-year-old brother, who had relocated to Canada for work at the age of 22 and only returned home twice a year, was speaking with our 62-year-old mother. This particular visit was different. He had stayed for an entire month because our mother had fallen seriously ill with a heart disease diagnosis. Normally, his presence was brief, but his extended stay due to our mother's deteriorating health was unusual. Despite maintaining a cordial relationship over the years, my brother and I were never particularly close. The geographical distance had strained our connection since he moved away for college, and he had built his life in Canada while I remained here. However, his return had brought a semblance of normalcy, especially as we rallied around our sick mother. Last week, while I was at my mother's house dropping off some soup for my father, who was running late, I decided to quietly enter the house using a spare set of keys. I intended to check on my mother, but as I approached her room, I was abruptly halted by the sound of her and my brother discussing my ex-girlfriend. Her name was unique enough that I was certain they were talking about the woman who had disappeared from my life 5 years ago. My mother mentioned bringing her and her children down to see them, citing her advancing age and illness as reasons she couldn't travel anymore. My brother responded by saying they had been contemplating how to bring her over without alerting me, emphasizing the risks involved and explaining why they hadn't managed to arrange it yet. It was in that moment I realized the truth: my ex-girlfriend had been with my own brother all along. For a few agonizing seconds, I stood there in stunned silence, unable to process the revelation that my family had been involved in hiding this secret from me for 5 years. The realization that they had been gaslighting me, knowing exactly where my girlfriend was but choosing to conceal the truth, was overwhelming. My family had manipulated the situation to protect my brother's happiness, even at the expense of my own well-being. Feeling a surge of anger and betrayal, I quietly left the house without uttering a word. Once home, I decided to log into one of the fake social media accounts I had created years ago in a desperate attempt to find any clue about her whereabouts. To my astonishment, I discovered my ex-girlfriend's account linked to my brother's profile, complete with photos of them together and a child who bore an uncanny resemblance to her, save for his eyes, which mirrored my brother's. It became painfully clear that my family had been covering up their affair, effectively stealing the life that was rightfully mine. The weight of this discovery crushed me. I had been grieving her disappearance, only to find out that my own family was the reason she was gone. They had blocked me from finding her, prevented me from getting any closure, and had chosen to protect my brother over me. This realization made me feel utterly violated and betrayed. In a moment of despair, I reached out to my family, leaving them a terse message expressing my knowledge of their deceit and my unwillingness to forgive them for the pain they had caused me over the years. I didn't seek forgiveness, I sought answers, but all I received was further rejection. The next step in my quest for closure led me to contact a few old friends from high school, hoping to find some solace or at least someone to talk to about the betrayal I had uncovered. Instead, I found myself spiraling into a deep depression, seeking refuge in alcohol to numb the pain. My descent into despair was so severe that I missed work for 2 consecutive days, overwhelmed not just by the physical effects of drinking but by the emotional torment of realizing that my family had chosen to prioritize my brother's happiness over mine. 5 years of silent suffering had left me feeling like I was on the verge of losing my sanity, with no one to turn to for support. I ignored the messages from my family, convinced that any attempt to reach out to them would be futile. In my anguish, I also reached out to my ex-girlfriend through her now-revealed Instagram account, desperate for any form of communication. Her response was cold and dismissive, informing me that she was now married with a child and that she owed me nothing in terms of explanations or closure. She suggested that if 5 years hadn't been sufficient for me to move on, then perhaps the problem lay with me, not her. Her harsh words only deepened my sense of rejection and abandonment. Despite her unkind response, I tried to find some semblance of peace. I realized that seeking explanations from her was futile and that her happiness was no longer my concern. My family had subjected me to years of deceit and betrayal, manipulating every aspect of our lives to hide the truth. Their actions had caused me immense suffering, and now that the truth was out, I felt an unbearable mix of anger and sadness. The realization that I had been living a lie for so long, believing in a relationship that was ultimately destroyed by my own family, was devastating. In an attempt to regain some control over my life, I decided to confront my family directly. 3 weeks after discovering the truth, my brother visited my house, seeking a civilized discussion about our situation. His approach was infuriating. I found him immature and unworthy of my time, especially since he had orchestrated the very betrayal that had shattered my life. It had been 3 weeks since I had overheard the conversation that exposed their secret, and since then, my family had been persistently texting me, trying to persuade me to engage in dialogue. I resisted, choosing not to open their messages or acknowledge their attempts to reconcile. Desperate for a resolution, my brother decided to come to me in person. His timing was infuriating, and I couldn't comprehend why they were so eager to mend fences now, especially when it was evident that their priorities had always been skewed in favor of him. He tried to explain that he and my ex had fallen in love during one of his visits home, and despite their best efforts to keep their distance, their relationship had flourished, forcing them to elope. According to him, our parents had chosen to keep their affair a secret to spare me the pain, with the intention of revealing the truth only once I had moved on emotionally. This convoluted plan only highlighted their inability to be honest with me from the start. Listening to his justification was both relieving and maddening. On one hand, I was glad that I hadn't forged any new relationships during those 5 years, which would have been destroyed by the revelation of their affair. On the other hand, the deceit and manipulation only compounded my trauma. My patience finally snapped after nearly half an hour of his attempts to reason with me. I demanded that he leave me alone, threatening to involve the police if he didn't comply. His response was equally volatile, as he explained that he was only there because our mother was severely apologetic and that the stress of my silence was worsening her health. He claimed that if our mother hadn't been sick, he would have simply returned to his life in Canada, leaving me to cope with the pain on my own. His final words were a taunt, suggesting that our mother's condition was the only reason he had bothered to reach out, implying that without her, he would have moved on without a second thought. This blatant disregard for my feelings pushed me to the brink of physical retaliation, but I managed to restrain myself. Instead, I told him to go to hell, enduring his verbal abuse with as much self-control as I could muster. Once he left, I found myself struggling to escape the haunting memories of his taunting voice, unable to find solace even in distractions like watching Netflix. The realization that my own family could be so heartless was unbearable, adding another layer of anguish to the pain I was already enduring. Despite everything, I felt a lingering sense of responsibility towards my ailing mother. Regardless of the betrayal I had experienced, her health was deteriorating, and I couldn't bring myself to completely sever ties with her. However, I was acutely aware that if her condition worsened, the rest of the family would likely blame me for not maintaining a relationship, further complicating my already shattered emotional state. I contemplated visiting her more regularly, despite the turmoil, to ensure that I wouldn't carry the burden of guilt should anything happen to her. In an unexpected turn of events, I finally managed to meet with my mother yesterday. The meeting was charged with emotion, as I had demanded that she and my father revise their wills to leave the majority of their assets to me. I was well aware that leaving everything to me would likely provoke my brother to contest the wills, a move I anticipated and prepared for. My goal was clear, to minimize what my brother would inherit, thereby balancing the scales after years of favoritism and deceit. Convincing my mother to agree to this was no small feat, but I made it abundantly clear that my continued relationship with her hinged entirely on this agreement. She reluctantly consented, and our family lawyer is scheduled to oversee the formal rewriting of the wills in the coming days. This arrangement would remain a closely guarded secret, ensuring that my parents couldn't manipulate the situation any further to favor my brother. The tables had turned, and it was my turn to assert control over the unfair circumstances that had been thrust upon me. My family's elaborate facade of normalcy, attending my brother's wedding and baby shower behind my back, taking vacations to visit him and my ex while simultaneously maintaining appearances elsewhere, had been exposed. Their attempts to deceive me were so elaborate that I could have easily mistaken them for professional actors deserving of Oscars for their performances. Their manipulative tactics were nothing short of cruel, and while I recognize that my actions in retaliating were harsh, they were a direct response to the years of suffering they had inflicted upon me. Yesterday, when I finally confronted my mother, she was in tears, expressing deep regret for her actions. However, her tears felt hollow and insincere, as if they were merely a performance rather than a genuine expression of remorse. She confessed that she and my father had known about the affair between my brother and my ex-girlfriend from the beginning, having caught them together one night when my brother was visiting her. At that time, I had been in another room, completely oblivious to their relationship. They had begged my brother to keep the affair secret, fearing the heartbreak it would cause me, and they had meticulously planned to inform me only after I had moved on to another relationship, thinking it would spare me additional pain. Their plan had been disastrously flawed, and when I decided to propose to my ex-girlfriend, they orchestrated her sudden disappearance by arranging her move to Canada, all while warning anyone who might come into contact with me to stay silent about her whereabouts. Their elaborate cover-up ensured that I never discovered the truth, allowing them to manipulate the situation to their advantage while I remained in the dark, searching for answers that would never come. Despite their attempts to make amends, their late admission of the truth only fueled my frustration and anger. I confronted her, expressing my disbelief and outrage at their manipulation. I made it clear that if she truly wanted to make things right, the only way would be to change their wills to reflect the new reality. The idea of demanding monetary compensation seemed both vindictive and necessary, given the extent of their betrayal. With the impending legal changes, I stood to inherit a significant portion of their wealth, ensuring that my brother would receive little to nothing. This redistribution of assets was a way to reclaim some sense of justice and balance after years of being wronged. As part of this new arrangement, I have decided to cut my brother out of my life entirely. His betrayal was unforgivable, and I have no desire to maintain any form of relationship with him moving forward. I also informed my mother that I would only continue to communicate with her out of concern for her health, not out of any lingering affection or loyalty. Her reaction was one of displeasure, but she had little choice but to accept my terms. While there remains a possibility that I might reconsider my stance in the future, my current resolve is unwavering. My brother and my ex-girlfriend deserve each other for their betrayal, and I deserve a life free from their deceit and manipulation. In the end, I no longer seek closure from either of them. The revelation of their affair and the subsequent years of hidden suffering have left me with little desire to engage further. Instead, I am focused on rebuilding my life, free from the shadows of their betrayal. The path ahead is uncertain, but I am determined to move forward, leaving behind the pain and reclaiming my sense of self-worth and dignity.